Hey everybody, this is Deb with Truthification Chronicles, and I have been reading stuff all day and searching for documents just for you guys, okay? But I think I found everything I was looking for on this one. I have some more documents that I found on something really important too, but I'm going to wait until tomorrow to do those. So let's get going with this one. Well, this is the website for the Office of Special Counsel. And probably by now you have heard that the Office of Special Counsel put out a report on Kellyanne Conway. And it recommends that Trump fire her, okay? Well, it's never as simple as the media makes it sound. So let's go through some of the actual documentation so that we can see, what the truth really is. And on this one, you're going to see two opposite opposing sides, and you're going to have to try to see how you think they fit together. So I'm going to provide you with some of them. I'm not going to read all of the stuff tonight because they're several pages long. And I'll just give you some summary and some highlights and things so you can, make your own decision on this. But I'll tell you how I thought when I read all this. So anyway, this is the website. I had trouble getting this to come up because I really think that there's been a lot of traffic on it. Anyway, if you want to see the congressional budget justification, they got all these reports here that you can see. Yeah, you have to scroll all the way down past all these reports. And you finally get to down here, personnel, okay? And you see that one, and it has some basic things there, but then you go past that, and you get the Federal Register notices. I'm still going. It's way down at the bottom of the page. Information technology. Lots of reports. If you like reading things, here they are. GHG emissions reports and Hatch Act. This is what we're finally getting down to, is the Hatch Act, because this is what they're accusing Kellyanne of violating. All right? And if you read only their stuff, it sounds plausible, but you've got to be on your guard and read things, keeping in mind what's going on in our society right now. So anyway, here are the documents. They're PDFs, and you can open them at your leisure if you want to. The links will be down below so you can check them out. This is also interesting. There's some others down here too, if you want to go on and read those. But there's two of them here for Kellyanne Conway. The first one was in 2018, and this is where they had a report of prohibited political activity under the Hatch Act. See, it's the same exact title. OSC file number HA 180966, Kellyanne Conway. And this one was in 2018. This one is 2019. So if you want to look at both of them, well, this is the one from 2019. The one from 2018 is right here. And I will link to that down below if you want to read it. It's 11 pages long. But it says similar things to what the one in 2019 says, except the one in 2019 sounds like they're starting to have a hissy fit. Okay, so it goes through and it says, well, there's times when she said things on a couple of TV shows where it was political campaigning, and that violates the Hatch Act. Well, let's go back to the one that we're working on for this, because this is the one that has to do with what's going on right now. It was put out June 13th, and this is a letter, actually, let me put it down just a little. This is a letter to the president, because the way that it works is this office is supposed to, keep an eye out for violations of the Hatch Act, and then they investigate it, and then they present a report to the president. And because it's, about the executive offices, and so it's people in the executive branch, and so that's under the president's purview. So he's the one that then makes the final decision. Well, they did make a recommendation in the first one in 2018. And of course, you can tell that Trump ignored it pretty much. They make a lot of claims in that one that I don't think really were the way it happened, because they're claiming that they, gave this reprimand to Kellyanne Conway and she never responded, and they gave her 30 more days and she didn't respond. And yeah, I'm having a hard time believing she wouldn't respond, that she just totally ignore things. And that's what they're trying to paint her out as, someone who has just totally ignored the whole idea of the Hatch Act. So this is what, I'll read the first part of this to you. Dear Mr. President, attached to this letter is a copy of the U.S. Office of Special Counsels, and that's the OSC that we're going to be seeing throughout this entire thing, investigative report detailing numerous violations of the Hatch Act committed by Counselor to the President, Kellyanne Conway. Ms. Conway's disregard for the restrictions the Hatch Act places on executive branch employees is unacceptable. See, now this is something that I think is a very charged word. And this was, when I was reading it, that this was one thing that kind of set off a little red flag. Because if their job is to, investigate things, they should be saying something more like, we investigated this and we want to give you our findings. This right here says, we have rendered a verdict. And I don't think they should be rendering verdicts. They should be saying more like, here is what we found. And this is really what Mueller was supposed to do. His team was really supposed to investigate and then present their findings in the Mueller report. But that's not what the Mueller report was all about. It was a hit piece. It was a bunch of disgruntled people who couldn't find any dirt on Donald Trump, so they wrote up things to make it look as bad as they possibly could. I mean, they took people that he had just talked to and, but there's something nefarious about it, and it wasn't true. And I think this is what really is going on here. Like I said, that was one key word there that just popped out at me. It's unacceptable, because that's a judgment word. And I don't think that's what this office is supposed to do. I know they're supposed to, indicate if there are violations of the Hatch Act, but it seems to me like if they're writing this letter to the president, it should be more of presenting their findings and letting him decide. So, if Ms. Conway were any other federal employee, her multiple violations of the law would almost certainly result in removal from her federal position by the Merit Systems Protection Board. Okay, so now they're blaming this Merit Systems Protection Board? What are they doing here? As a highly visible member of the administration, Ms. Conway's violations, if left unpunished, send a message to all federal employees that they need not abide by the Hatch Act's restrictions. Her actions erode the principal foundation of our democratic system, the rule of law. Does this sound like what we're hearing Democrats say, in response to the whole Mueller report and everything, and why they're targeting Trump? This is like echoes of the same words. Did they get like some kind of 4 a.m. talking points or what? Anyway, since at least February 1st, 2019, Ms. Conway has repeatedly violated the Hatch Act during her official media appearances by making statements directed at the success of your re-election campaign or at the failure of candidates for the Democratic Party's nomination for president. In doing so, she has used her official authority to advocate for or against declared candidates for partisan political office. Well, good grief. Most of the people in the Democrat Party right now are running for president. So how can you avoid hitting one of them? I mean, really, there's 10 zillion of them. I lost count. I don't even know how many of them there are anymore. So, in doing so, she has used her official authority to advocate for or against declared candidates for partisan political office. OSC has given Ms. Conway multiple opportunities to come into compliance with the Hatch Act. Ms. Conway has ignored OSC's requests. See, and again, I find it very hard to believe that she's just ignoring them. And I don't buy it. To make matters worse, Ms. Conway is a repeat offender. She's a repeat offender whose violations detailed in the attached report are similar to those identified and referred to you in OSC's March 6, 2018 report. That's the other one I showed you. As with the prior case, OSC also offered Ms. Conway an opportunity to respond to this report. In both instances, however, she declined to do so. Yeah, I don't think she declined to do so. I'm thinking there's more to it. OSC's Career Hatch Act staff have long conducted thorough and impartial investigations of alleged Hatch Act violations, including by senior officials in administrations of both parties. Never has OSC had to issue multiple reports to the president concerning Hatch Act violations by the same individual. I mean, they're really painting her out to be just awful at this point. Ms. Conway's actions and statements stand in stark contrast to the culture of compliance promised by your White House counsel and undermine your efforts to create and enforce such a culture. Therefore, OSC respectfully requests that Ms. Conway be held to the same standards as all other federal employees, and as such, you find removal from federal service to be the appropriate disciplinary action. Now, again, I'm not that familiar with this particular office, okay? But it just seems to me like they are overstepping their boundaries here. That's what struck me as I started reading this. Well, if you go through, I mean, they give all the reasons why. But I wanted to show you this little footnote right here. And I just thought this was kind of interesting because it says, this report represents the deliberative attorney work product of the U.S. Office of Special Counsel and is considered privileged and confidential. Any release of information beyond persons specifically designated by the U.S. Office of Special Counsel to have access to its contents is prohibited. So here's my question. How come this is on their website? Yep, remember, that's where I got this, back here on their website. So if this is protected under that, statement, it says it's prohibited. So how can they have it there so anyone can read it? Just thought I'd point that out to you. Anyway, the report does go through and it gives, here's this summary. And again, I'm not going to read the whole thing because it's 18 pages long. In a May 29, 2019 interview, Ms. Kellyanne Conway, counselor to the president, reportedly scoffed at her responsibilities under the Hatch Act and ridiculed its enforcement by asserting, "Let me know when the jail sentence starts." Okay, it's taken totally out of context. You got to hear the whole context of the thing to understand what was going on. There was some bozo reporter who was really hitting her on stuff. And, so she was trying to come back at him because he thought he knew everything about the Hatch Act and he didn't know squat. So she was kind of being a little smart about it, but she wasn't out of line, really. Her defiant attitude is inimical to the law, and her continued pattern of misconduct is unacceptable. I mean, these people are very judgmental. Can't you just hear that in the words they're choosing? So, the U.S. Office of Special Counsel calls on President Donald J. Trump to remove Ms. Conway from her federal position immediately. Yeah, immediately. So, anyway, it goes on and it tells the reasons why they think she should be removed, that she is violating, the Hatch Act, in case you don't know, prohibits federal civilian executive branch employees from using their official authority or influence for the purpose of interfering with or affecting the result of an election. And so, they're claiming that because she spoke out about various candidates, that she was interfering with an election. Okay? And it's not that way at all. But that's what they claim in this. Anyway, it goes on and it talks about her Twitter account as well, and that she's violating with her Twitter account, and that she's spoken against these different Democratic candidates. And like I said, you can't throw a dead cat without hitting one of the Democrat presidential candidates. I mean, they're everywhere. So, and that she said different things about them. Well, we're going to discuss that in just a minute, but I want to go down to, let me see where it is here. This is kind of what they're trying to say here. Numerous aggravating factors support OSC's recommendation that the president remove Ms. Conway from her federal position. First, Ms. Conway has substantial knowledge of the Hatch Act and was previously found to have violated the law by engaging in very similar conduct. And that was the other letter. But many of the flaws that are in this one are also in that one. So you'll find out in just a minute. Indeed, in March 2018, she was the subject of another disciplinary action referral from OSC to the president for engaging in political activity during official media interviews. Second, OSC repeatedly requested that Ms. Conway comply with the law. OSC sent a letter to Ms. Conway about her impermissible Twitter use in December 2018, warned the Office of White House Counsel in 2 March 2019 meetings about her political activity during official media appearances, and sent another letter to the Office of White House Counsel in April 2019 concerning her Twitter account. So these people are none too happy with her because she speaks the truth. And we don't want to hear that, right? Lastly, Ms. Conway failed to comply with OSC's requests and, in fact, escalated her partisan critiques of candidates after OSC had communicated to the White House that her conduct violated the law. In sum, Ms. Conway continues to violate the Hatch Act and signals that she will not comply with the law. Okay. This is what they're saying. And if you read through this whole thing, and this is all you read, you probably, unless you're really alert and you're paying attention, you probably would be going, yeah, she did. Oh, she needs to be removed. Kick her out. And this is what the entire mainstream media is going to be telling people, because they're certainly not going to see the other side of it, and they're not going to question anything this OSC is saying, because, this OSC is, an impartial group, and they're not partisan at all. Yeah, right, they're not partisan at all. We'll see. Anyway, so if you read through this, like I said, you just keep reading and you come across a lot of stuff that is just really irritating, but it makes her look extremely guilty unless, of course, you're really paying attention. And if you watch, it gives you links to the things, like these different articles, these different videos. You can watch the clips and you can make the decision for yourself. I've watched the clips and I understood what she was doing, that, her entire job is to kind of translate what Trump's thinking. And what I mean? It's to convey what Trump is thinking. And that's what she's supposed to be doing. Well, when they ask her what Trump thinks about certain people, what's she supposed to say? So, they're mad because she talked to all these people. But anyway, I wanted to show you the conclusion is that her Hatch Act violations are egregious, notorious, and ongoing. So again, notice how these are just judgment charge words. And I just think that they kind of stepped over the line when with talking about this. And they give some of the final quotes about her and everything. And it just is like, that she knew the Hatch Act and yet continues to disregard the law. This is a big part of it. And that her conduct warrants her removal. And because that's what they're saying, that they have to. All right. So this is, like I said, the whole report here. I'm going to leave it down below if you want to read the whole thing, but it really does an attack job on her. Everything, if you only read this and you weren't really paying attention, you would be like, oh, she's just so guilty. But we have a rebuttal. And here is the White House rebuttal. Now, you guys have probably heard me talk before about Cipollone or whatever. I've heard his name pronounced different ways, but that's the one that I seem to hear the most. So I'm going to go with that unless I hear different. So whatever. But he is currently the White House counsel. And so he sent this letter to the Honorable Henry Kerner, who is the author of this report, by the way. It doesn't have a signature on it, but he is the one that put out this report. Oh, it had his signature up here. There, Harry J. Kerner. Okay, because he's the head guy of that particular office. So this is who it's to, and this was put out June 11th. And if you remember, this came out June 13th. Well, there were some things that went on before these two letters came out. So here is the rebuttal, but obviously they didn't think much of the rebuttal and they went ahead and released this anyway, which it still has that statement on there saying it's not supposed to be out there in the public. So go figure. I write to submit an initial response to the draft Office of Special Counsel report concerning Assistant to the President and Counselor to the President Kellyanne Conway, and there's the report. Now notice this report, when they first sent it to the White House counsel, it was dated May 30th. That's the date that the report had on it. Okay, now that was a draft report. That's not the same one as this, because this has June 13th on it. But anyway, OSC's draft report is based on multiple fundamental legal and factual errors, makes unfair and unsupported claims against a close advisor to the president, is the product of a blatantly unfair process that ignored statutory notice requirements, and has been influenced by various inappropriate considerations. As a result, the current report would serve only to undermine public confidence in OSC and its procedures. At 5:00 p.m. on May 29th, OSC provided the White House with a 17-page report, 17-page report raising numerous unsubstantiated allegations spanning many months, many of which had never been raised by OSC through the appropriate procedure. See, they do have a procedure in place. And so it's supposed to, things are supposed to be addressed as they come up, and that was not being done because those had not been brought to their attention. And so then it says, OSC then demanded a response by 9:00 a.m. Okay? Now, I understand 17 pages is no big deal to read over a night, but you have to also prepare responses, and they have to be legal responses, all the legal stuff that goes on. And so they had to do that, and you just don't do that overnight. You don't, that's not how attorneys work. So they gave it to them at 5:00 at night, which is, at the end of the working day, and then they wanted the responses by 9:00 a.m. As you later acknowledged, OSC's actions were prompted by your desire to respond to press questions concerning a media report that day about comments that Ms. Conway had allegedly made, and by the purported personal offense that you took to those comments, even though you made no effort to investigate before rushing to judgment. OSC's patently unreasonable demand for an overnight response standing alone shows that the report was the product of a fatally flawed process. Now, he goes on, and really he takes everything apart. I was not real thrilled at the beginning of reading this rebuttal, and I thought, wow, he's talking in generalities. This is just not right. But then he started going into more detail, and he did a great job rebutting it all. So, don't think that at first, just because he's given this overview here, that, he doesn't have any teeth to what his argument is, but he does. Indeed, the report is based on numerous grave legal, factual, and procedural errors. First, even assuming that the Hatch Act applies to the most senior advisors to the president in the White House, OSC has violated its statutory obligation to provide Ms. Conway a reasonable opportunity to respond, violated Ms. Conway's due process rights, and abused its discretion by issuing a report tainted by inappropriate external influences. In other words, the press made them do it. Okay, I understand the press heard her say some things, but in their little evil minds, that's where their minds went, that she was doing something wrong. She was violating the Hatch Act. She had to be. This couldn't be right. She had no rights to say anything bad about any Democrat. You just can't do that. You know, you can say bad stuff about Republicans, of course, but you can't do it about the Democrats. So, you know, they were all bent out of shape with that. This is what Cipollone is pointing out here, and that's the external influences, the press. Second, OSC's overbroad and unsupported interpretation of the Hatch Act risks violating Ms. Conway's First Amendment rights and chills the free speech of all government employees. And this is a big part of what he's talking about here, the overbroad and unsupported interpretation. Because as it goes through, he points out that what they're trying to say about how you can use your Twitter account, it's not anything in the rules. And there's a procedure for putting things in the rules. And they didn't follow that at all. So in essence, the whole procedure they were using here, the whole standard they were measuring her use of social media with, was based on their opinions, purely on their opinions. It had not been vetted by anyone else like it was supposed to be. And so it was just an opinion thing. And, you know, because they were like saying that if you only have one Twitter account and you use it to post any pictures of yourself in your official position, then it's an official account. Who says you got like one or two pictures of yourself in your official account and then, you know, you use it otherwise? And see, she's not using an official, like, government type Twitter account. Her account is something she had before, you know, all this started. I think somewhere in here it says it went back to 2012. Well, you know, she wasn't anything in the government then. And she was a regular person like you and me, and she was just posting her ideas. And of course, a lot of her ideas were posting comments about maybe the crazy left and, you know, how conservative ideas are and, you know, trying to promote those. That's what she's still doing with it. And so not a lot changed. She's just doing the same stuff she was doing before. So anyway, it goes through and it continues. In fact, OSC has no legal authority to promulgate guidance on social media use that it treats effectively as binding rules in order to enforce its overbroad interpretation of the act. And that's what I just described to you that they were doing. Third, contrary to your letter, Ms. Conway's Twitter account and her media appearances do not violate even the standards used by OSC itself. Worst of all, OSC's call upon the president to remove Ms. Conway from her federal position immediately is as outrageous as it is unprecedented. And again, that's what I was thinking when I read it the very first time, because it's like, whoa, you're kind of overstepping your boundary there, telling the president what he's supposed to be doing. Isn't he kind of in charge of the executive branch? I think so. OSC's overreaching recommendation is wholly unsupported by any statute or the Constitution. Additionally, it appears that the OSC has not been applying its vague standards even-handedly across Democratic and Republican administrations. So, yeah, there's bias here. And this is something that they have been dealing with, you know, that they've been putting this out. And he really did harp on this. You gave it to us at 5 o'clock on the 29th, and on the 30th, by 9 a.m., you wanted it, you know, to be all responded to. And it's like, no, that was not fair. And so he does mention that several times, because I think he was really ticked off on that one. But anyway, let me go down here just a little bit right here. OSC's hasty decision to finalize and send this report is particularly troubling because, by OSC's own admission, it was prompted by inappropriate external influences that should have no bearing on the work of an independent federal investigative and prosecutorial agency. Office of Special Counsel, and this is one of their publications here, What We Do, and it's at that particular webpage. OSC acknowledges that its practice in the past has been to provide notice concerning specific allegations and to engage in discussions to reconcile differences in our interpretations of the law and application of the law to the facts. Here, by contrast, OSC has acknowledged that its decision to rush the report out the door without the usual process was a reaction to a media report on the morning of May 29th regarding a passing comment by Ms. Conway, a comment that is not itself alleged to be a Hatch Act violation. After admitting that OSC relied solely on the media report to assess Ms. Conway's comment, you specifically said that the office had to act quickly because it had been receiving pressing queries and had to be mindful of interest from politicians outside of the office. This is deeply troubling. As an independent federal agency, OSC has a duty both to remain impartial and to maintain both the appearance and the reality of remaining impervious to external political and media influence. I mean, really? Hello? You're supposed to not cave to people like that. That's the whole point of being independent. So anyway, the most alarming fact is that personal pique appears to have influenced the outcome of this investigation, including the decision to make the extraordinary recommendation that the president remove one of his closest advisors. The first paragraph of the report focuses exclusively on Ms. Conway's comment as reported earlier on the morning of May 29th and bases the decision to recommend termination on that comment. While explaining why OSC needed a response overnight, you explained that not only did you feel a strong external pressure to release the report, but that you also personally took great offense to Ms. Conway's comment and repeatedly complained about the level of disrespect towards OSC that you perceived in that comment. OSC again made no effort to reach out to the White House to verify Ms. Conway's reported comment or seek any clarifying or contextual information from Ms. Conway before sending that report. Setting aside the reality that Ms. Conway's comment was taken out of context, the fact that personal bias and the desire to respond to a media article apparently prompted the decision to release the report 7 hours later eviscerates the credibility of the report, including its conclusions and unprecedented and unwarranted recommendation. He goes through point by point and he shows why they really have no leg to stand on. And if you read this, and a lot of people, again, are only going to read that one, unfortunately, but this is what people need to see, because he's pointing out so many ways that that is flawed, and it's just a bunch of hooey, a bunch of mud that they're slinging on the wall, and they're hoping some of it's going to stick. So let me go down to, I think it was down here, somewhere. I think it's the bottom of page 10. Okay. So, vague standards invite abuse. The opaque manner in which OSC has drafted and applied its standards on political activity has led to the inevitable abuse of discretion. Unfortunately, OSC's overreaching in its efforts to target Ms. Conway, combined with its history of refusing to apply its policies even-handedly to the prior Democratic administration, create the impression that OSC is attempting to tilt the political playing field and to inject itself into partisan politics. For example, during the Obama administration, Press Secretary Josh Earnest, honestly, the guy's name was Ernest. I think they made these names up. I mean, the first one's name was Carney, like a Carney trying to sell you something that's not true. And then you get some guy in there whose name is Ernest because he's so earnest about what he's saying, right? I know. The names, sometimes you have to look at them and you think, did they name these people on purpose? Anyway, or pick somebody with that name on purpose. Anyway, Press Secretary Josh Earnest made a lengthy and vitriolic statement attacking then candidate Trump during the presidential campaign while speaking to reporters in his official capacity from the podium of the White House briefing room. When asked why OSC did not file a complaint or author a report on this incident, the office merely stated that the public had not complained about his egregious behavior. So I guess it's because the public complains? Why should that be something? I mean, this is how they judge if it's a violation of the Hatch Act or not. If enough people complain about it, then, let's send in a bunch of them on people like Schumer and Pelosi and those guys. It doesn't matter if it's true or not, right? We can just send it in because it doesn't matter anymore if things are true. They can just toss out any kind of mud. So, anyway. But the whole point of vesting an independent agency with the authority to investigate and report on violations of the Hatch Act is to eliminate the bias that bears down on politically targeted individuals and to ensure that the law is applied even-handedly. The disparate treatment of Mr. Earnest and Ms. Conway violates traditional notions of fairness. And, he does a really good job. He says, so if you're going to really persist on this, I'm giving you till June 21st. I want these things. And it's basically, I want all the documentation, not just some. I want everything, your entire investigation files. I want all the emails you people sent back and forth, all the internal correspondence, all the external correspondence. I want everything. So this ought to be fun. It ought to be pretty fun, right? So there he is. There's his signature at the bottom. And it was a good letter. It really was. So something to think about. Read through them both. Hang on to this one. And when people start giving you grief about her, send this one to them, okay? Give them the link for this because they need to read this. And if anybody is, an open-minded person, you read both sides, then you make your decision. Now, they may not always agree with me because I side with Cipollone, okay? But even if they don't agree, they should read both sides of the issue. And you can kind of get some liberals to think about that because you have different kinds of people. There are some people that it wouldn't matter if, it would not matter to them if God himself was standing right in front of them and did an incredible miracle for them. They would still not believe in him. And the same thing with this. It wouldn't matter to some people, to some of the liberals, if you can prove it beyond a shadow of a doubt, they're still not going to believe. But a lot of them, if you can reason with them and you can say, okay, I understand that you may be thinking that she's really guilty from all the articles that you read because, there are tons of articles. Okay, I understand that. And the articles I've been seeing have really been trashing her because they're all based on the report that came out and they don't seem to mention much about this letter. Although a lot of them mention the letter, but they skip over it and they never give you a link to it. I had a dickens of a time finding the link to this. So, yeah, it took me some digging because evidently you can't find the Office of Legal Counsel. I don't know that they have a web page. I have not been able to find it. I'm still looking. I think I can probably eventually find it, but it's not easy, So, yes, this exists. And if you talk to a lot of liberals, the ones that you can reason with somewhat, ask them if they've actually read the documents. Because a lot of times people are forming their opinions on these media articles. And the media articles are really not treating the whole issue. And this is one reason why I like on my channel to always go to the actual documents. Because when you read through the documents yourself, then you can make an informed opinion. because you've actually read the document, like the 302s for Flynn. Oh, those are interesting. Oh, another video. Yeah, I just got a lot of videos that I need to be doing because so much came out today. And, it's just like every day there's a lot of stuff coming out. But you need to share this with a lot of liberals, because if you can say, okay, did you read both sides of the issue? Here's the report. Here's the rebuttal, read them both, and then make up your mind. And at least if you do that, you're getting them to see that there are two sides of the story, and that maybe there's more going on than what the press is telling them. So, that's kind of what we got to do to wake them up, because they're so ingrained in this media. This is where we get our news. This is how we get it. And if they're not seeing the other side of the story, if they're not being presented with both sides of an issue, it's just not fair. As I've said before several times, I used to do biblical counseling online in chat rooms, and a lot of times people were coming to us with these marital issues. Well, the thing is, when somebody comes in a situation like that and you're only hearing one side of the story, I can't necessarily say that that person is telling me an accurate view of what's really happening. So I always tried to kind of take it with a grain of salt and say, well, there are always two sides of a story. And when you have divorces going on, there's always two sides of a story. Now, whether one side is a little more valid than the other side, that's what you have to decide if you're working with them. But there are always two sides of stories when there's conflicts between two people. And if you're not hearing both sides of the story, you're going to have a rather skewed view. And we have to make sure that we're listening to both sides of the story and then forming our opinions, because only then are we going to have an opinion that's based on fact and not just on hearsay. So give them both links, say, read them for yourself, go through them both, line them up, see how you think they go together. Does one of them have a better case than the other? And you have to put aside your personal feelings for Kellyanne Conway if they're going to be honest about this, because, if you don't like somebody, you can't automatically assume that everything they do is wrong. But you will tend to because of your feelings. So you got to step away from your feelings for a little bit and use your mind instead, and read both sides of the issue, and then look at them together, see which one has the best case. So anyway, that's what I've got for you on this one. I want to thank you for stopping by, and I'll see y'all later.